Well, Paperson extends from the Chinese Exclusion Act. The Chinese Exclusion Act excludes all Chinese immigration into the United States in 1883 in May. It was passed by Congress. The only people that could come into the country were businessmen, diplomats, some scholars, and very few exceptions. Um, but that was the major thing, is that it cut down the Chinese immigration into the United States. Before that time, about 25% of the workforce in California were Chinese men. They built the railroad, they built the dikes in the San Joaquin Valley, they built some of the wineries up in Napa. They started the fishing industry down in Monterey until it was taken over by the Italians. You know what they were involved? They were the first farm workers. So the whole state of California was dependent on Chinese labor. Uh, uh, the other factor was that, as I said, they built the railroads, which made it possible for Easterners to come west without having to go by wagon train, which is a very long journey for horses in this day. So what it did was open up California for economic progress. Many people do not realize that. And it started a lot of industry, which is a major thing now, like agricultural, fishing industry, and wineries and whatnot. But anyway, unfortunately, there was a civil war, and after the Civil War, of course, a lot of people were out of work, and economic conditions were poor. And there was a guy by the name of Kennedy. I forgot what his first name. But anyway, he started a movement, anti-Chinese movement in San Francisco, and started that, and resulting in the passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is the act that excluded almost every Chinese. As a matter of fact, even Chinese who were born here, who went back to China and couldn't get back in because they can't prove their citizenship. And a lot of people were left here because, one, most of the Chinese here were coolies, were poor people. At that time, China was, southern China especially, was in poor economic and social condition because the country was being taken over by European countries. The Chinese were left with very little resources for making a living. So when they had the opportunity to come to the United States, mostly jump at it, and they come as contract workers, which is where all your railroad workers and all your so-called coolie workers came. And that was the whole reason for the Chinese coming into the United States. Of course, the gold rush have something to do with it, but that's the minor part. Um, but anyway, it excluded a lot of people, and it came down to just a tiny bit of immigration. Uh, and but Chinese were very clever. They 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 found ways to get around some of the Exclusion Act, and one of them was that if a Chinese went back who have a citizenship or a green card that they are residents in the United States, they would go back to China to marry. They stayed there for a few months and they would come back. And in coming back, they would report that they have a child, when in fact they did not. So there's a slot there that's open for a child to come. And this is that slot that you buy. That's the paper. It just happened that my uncle went back to China. He got married. He came back over. He reported he had a son, when in fact he did not have one. So my grandmother bought that for me to come over. Uh, so although the dates are different, I think my paper said I was a few months older than I am, and they were afraid I couldn't pass the immigration. But they do try. Now the procedure is this: I have to leave my family, my own parents, and live with my aunt, who was, supposedly have a son. I lived with her for almost half a year to get used to her and keep calling her mom, which really is false. And I have to remember things, where I have a long list of stuff that you have to remember, because this immigration will ask you all these questions you have to ask correctly. Don't answer correctly, you're back to China. And my aunt also have to learn all these stuff. So that is essentially a paper son, is a slot that is somehow created through that procedure. Sometimes the men would stay for a year or so, say, I have two. I don't know how he got two, but stay long enough so that, they figure that he can have two. And they report two when in fact they have none. So so that's what's known as a paper son. Well, Angel Island was, let's see, I lived with my aunt, who was supposed to be my mother, and, we had regular metal bunk beds. I don't know if you're familiar with the Army cots, but that's what it is. Not very comfortable, and it's like a big dormitory. Well, not even a dormitory, because there's about, I think 30 or 50 people sleeping in the same room. And you just keep your bag underneath your bed. That's about it. There's really shared bathrooms and whatnot. There's really nothing to do except to sit around and wait. And sometimes some people wait there for days, months, and few people a year.